Well, thanks guys for joining the inaugural podcast,
That's right.
Business Business Growth Strategy and Execution with Beast Mode Jordan and Howie, Brian Howard,
Howie.
yours truly. And yeah, we're just excited to have you and we're going to do basically a bunch of business topics. I think Jordan, I'll kind of share my heart and you can share your heart.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of this which is encouragement. There's an element of this which is sharing battles, and there's an element where we'll, randomly talk about things to help people improve their business. I think we also want to go for, having guest speakers. We already have some lined up.
Yeah.
That's a few thoughts. But Beast Mode, what about you?
Yeah. It's going to, I think, stick to the mindset of where we've been coming from is that there's a lot of people who are struggling and maybe they don't even know they're struggling. And so it's just that open line of communication of just, hey, we're all out here. We're all doing business together. We can all lean on each other. And I know just in our relationship over the past year that I know that you've really poured into me and, I'm really appreciative of that, and I'm excited for this opportunity together.
Awesome.
But
well, I'm too.
So today, whenever we were talking, we were following up, and you were telling me about this interesting idea about this concept that you were having between bottom-up analysis and top-down analysis, and we were going back and forth. But why don't you explain the situation and where it really started off with you?
Thanks. So back in 2009, somewhere around there, I was working with one of my sales reps, Kim, awesome person that I just really enjoyed working with, but she had a particular problem with an account. The account is a Washington State account that is famous in the reporting space, and we provided monitoring services to them, and we had some serious problems with the account. I don't remember what they were, but we had some pretty serious, that could have risked the account, issues that were happening. So Kim pulled me aside for a strategy discussion, and we spent some time basically brainstorming what to do to make the account more successful so that they would retain and even possibly grow. And so it's kind of a customer success sort of a situation. And I found myself basically digging in, and even though I knew the account a little bit and I worked with Kim for quite a while at that time, I found myself asking some pretty fundamental questions, just really digging for, bedrock, to use the gold mining analogy.
Sure.
And I just kept digging and asking really basic questions. Some of the questions were even kind of stupid, like really fundamental things that maybe even I should have known, but I was just digging and digging, and I was kind of following my curiosity. I was kind of following my heart and following the open questions that I had. And I was putting myself out there, and I was being transparent and basically asking a lot of questions. And so, after a period, and Kim is a very gracious person, and she put up with all of those, all that grilling that I was giving her, positive grilling, of course, but I just mean the drill down. And what was interesting after however many minutes that was, the answer to the customer's problem actually just presented itself, and it became self-evident. And it was a matter of basically bottom-up analysis driven by transparent questions, vulnerable, asking vulnerable questions, being willing for me to look stupid. Yeah. And so Kim allowed me to do that. And because of her humility and openness and trust in me, and because of my, willingness to be vulnerable and do that bottom-up analysis and look a little stupid, we came up with a great answer, and the customer was just fine. And I found myself, and I kind of like observe myself sometimes, and I'm like, why am I doing that? And so I took a step back and I said, what just happened here? And I think I might have even shared it with her. I certainly later on used that as a business technique in that company and since then. But it's basically bottom-up analysis, right? So there's sort of two types of analysis that I have seen, and there maybe there's a third, but there's two that I've seen. And there's just kind of different personality styles. And like you kind of told me today at lunch when we were talking about this, maybe it's kind of a little bit based on the role that you're in. I thought that was a great thought.
Yeah.
But there's two major styles. There's top-down analysis, and sort of top-down decision making, where people take that, maybe it's their experience, maybe it's things that analysts are saying, or thinkers are saying, high-level people are saying, and they basically sort of make decisions based on a top-level strategy, and they push that down.
Mm.
And this strategy that I'm talking about is one that I find myself doing a lot of, which is bottom-up analysis, which is taking a lot of evidence and a lot of data points, and essentially the truth starts to speak to me because I interrogate the situation and I ask those dumb questions, basically.
Yeah.
So beast mode, I think for me, that's kind of a little bit of a description of bottom-up problem solving in business. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it can certainly help you in your personal life too. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I really love the way that you said that you have to be vulnerable. I don't think it's necessarily for just bottom up analysis. I think just in those, and again, we started by having an open line of communication by saying, yeah, hey, I'm willing to ask a question that maybe I should know the answer to, but for all sakes, let's find out, if I do know the answer or if I know it as well as I think I do. Um, there's got to be a willingness to say, yeah, hey, we have to start somewhere, and so let's start here at the bottom. And so for me, I think bottom up analysis, and clarify me in your thoughts. Bottom up analysis has to start at least where you are, and sometimes I think it even has to start a step below where you're at to make sure that you're including all the processes, procedures, or applications. And then what you're doing is you're pushing it all the way up to the top, finding, as you were talking about earlier, the tentacles and where they connect and how they connect. And so I know that we did talk about saying some of that may be a positional thing, to where if you're in a position that's more of a managerial role as opposed to an overall leadership role as an executive, maybe it's easier to choose the bottom up analysis because of the lack thereof of immediacy of results that can happen from top down. But then also bottom up also can give you more of a thorough understanding of the entire organization. So
It's good.
what do you think?
I think that's good. And I think, when you threw that back to me at lunch and said, I think some of this might be reflective of the role that you're in at different times in your career. And I thought that was really insightful, because I have found that I do apply top-down decision making and top-down problem solvings at times. And that's when I have, for example, experienced, a certain situation in another company or in another time at the same company, and I'll be saying, okay, that applies over here because it worked really well over here, and it feels like the same situation, right? So there's kind of, maybe it's a combination. Maybe we use both types. But I like what you said. A couple things that really spoke to me that I think will help everybody, though. One of them is that you touched on it before you got into all that, and you said something about why do we hesitate, or something like that, like why do we hesitate? And I think this goes back to emotional intelligence, mental health, faith, putting ourselves out there a little bit, having a little bit, you kind of force a little bit of courage to be transparent, and I think that's a big lesson, is that if you think about it this way, think about the consequences of what you just said. The consequences, if I am so insecure or hurt or broken, or if I've had a bad experience with an executive, or if I've had a bad experience with an employee or whatever, or my dad or something, right? Whatever the inner situation is that's holding me back from asking that stupid question, means I'm literally breaking the chain of bottom up analysis, and I'm making myself incapable of doing it.
Yeah.
So the consequences to our viewers is that if you don't put yourself out there and ask those dumb questions, and have the courage to have people laugh at you sometimes, right? Because different people they might tease you, in a fairly harmless way. Usually it's harmless.
Sure.
But literally, if we limit ourselves based on somebody having a different reaction that we maybe don't like, or just that we feel insecure, we're literally breaking our business capability of doing bottom up analysis, which the reason I was able to apply some top down analysis later on in my career is because why? Because I experienced the benefit initially of a lot of bottom up analysis of being on the ground, solving problems. So now I can go somewhere else and I can provide that top down perspective because I have the history of bottom up. So literally a person listening to this podcast, if they will just put themselves out there, be transparent, be a little bit humble, get past, know that you've got the hurts or whatever the thing is that's bothering you, holding you back from asking those honest business questions. If you can just make yourself get past that, it'll get easier after you do it a couple of times. It's like working out or anything else. You got to force yourself to do it a few times. But then what will happen is by you asking dumb questions, by you asking a lot of questions, and like Jordan says, like Beastmode says, being willing to be a little bit vulnerable, you're going to basically empower your life and your business and your career by giving you more tools and more information to make decisions from for good bottom-up troubleshooting and problem solving and business planning, and eventually really good top-down executive style business execution. So I really like what you said because I hadn't thought of that until today, till now, that wow, it's really important for us to coach people and inspire people a little bit, Beast Mode, because if they don't realize that some of these inner things are actually going to affect the trajectory of their business success.
Yeah. And there's a thought that popped into my head the entire time that you were talking. And it seems like that you have to, whether you're coming from the top and going down, or you're coming from the bottom and going up, you have to include yourself in the analysis. And I think, because I know that I've been guilty of it before, where I start the analysis either just above where I am, because potentially I may be part of the problem and I don't want to address that. So if I start above me and push up, then I can still find issues, but maybe I'm not the issue. And that's a negative. We don't need to do that. We need to include ourselves. That's why if we start bottom up, we need to start below where we are to include ourselves in the entire process. Same thing if we're in a position of leadership and we're in a position that we're guiding others, we need to make sure that we're including ourselves as we're pushing it down. Otherwise, we're going to alleviate ourselves from any points of error, which is, again, it's not vulnerable. It's actually blame shifting. And again, from a faith-based perspective, that's where a lot of things started off in the very beginning, by blame shifting and putting something on somebody else.
Wow, that's good. So that's another good, so as far as increasing your power and your effectiveness in your bottom up analysis, if people will try to make sure to ask those vulnerable questions about what could I be doing wrong, then basically they're giving themselves a bigger picture and a more complete picture to look at. That is really, really wonderful to unpack that for us.
Yeah. And, when I do some sessions, I do some things every week where, I like to ask questions, hey, where's an area that we made a mistake at last week? Where's an area that we did really well? One of the best questions that I ask is, what question did we not ask last week that we need to ask this week? And it doesn't matter who forgot to ask it. It doesn't matter anything like that. But where are we missing the mark? And if it's me, then please point it out. We need to address it. So.
I sometimes ask my team, I have a saying that my team would be very familiar with, which is don't suffer long. And what that means is that if they are going, and by the way, I always have to remind them about this. It's actually interesting. You would think if your boss said, hey, don't suffer long on a particular issue, you would think they would have so much freedom to just bring you anything and get things out of their way and things that are bothering them, which probably means they're bothering my business, right? If it's bothering my employee, it's probably in the way of my business too, right? But I actually have to remind them all the time, don't suffer long. And the reason why is because if I can convince them not to suffer long, then I'm feeding from the bottom, right? I'm feeding some of that bottom up analysis. I'm giving myself inputs and data points of things that are wrong with the business. Because if they work for me and they have a responsibility and they are suffering with something, that probably means there's something in the way of my business that I want to break through. And so don't suffer long is a nice saying that the people that are watching this can give to their employees. Don't suffer long. Because but you're not only sort of like doing the right thing for your team, but you're also giving them opportunities to give you feedback of something that's in your way that you don't realize. So there's a lot of forms, Jordan, of bottom-up analysis, actually. Another one that I really love, do you mind if I switch into a data thing?
No, let's do it, please.
So one of the things that is really, really interesting right now, I'm going through 20,000 rows of data for this project. It's a long story. It's actually more than 20,000, and it's just a long story. I'm kind of stuck in doing it due to some experience that I have and a certain need and whatnot, and freeing the team up for something else. So anyway, I'm just involved in some truly bottom up analysis. Like, it doesn't get any more bottom up than 20,000 rows in Excel, right?
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting project. And what I found is that by slicing and dicing and going through that data, I'm actually coming up with some interesting conclusions.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where I want to go next, which is this. Yeah. If you can look at your customer segment data, and Jordan, you're really good at this too. So we should talk about this Beastmode. So if you look at, your customer data, that's a great particular, literally, you've got, let's say the people on the phone have, 100 customers, right? Literally pulling up your 100 customers up in a spreadsheet and looking through the different aspects of what the products are that they own, when they bought their products, when's the last time they bought a product, right? There's things that will call out to you as you dig into your data. And you kind of inspired this a minute ago when you said, what questions am I not asking, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. But if you look at your customer data or your product data, or make it up, so we might have people on from up in Plano from Toyota Connected, right? And so they might want to look at, what is their AI, what are their AI logs logging? What are they, what's being said, what's being captured by AI feedback from logging, right? You might have security data. So a lot of you guys out there have, and I have some people in my network that are in the security space. You might have, your SIM, your logging product. You might have Splunk or Elastic or another SIM that you're using to do security capture, right? So spending some time with that data is going to cause things to jump out to you. But, it's not a 5-minute exercise to come up with some really brilliant connections. It's going to take a little bit of time. In this case, I've been spending a couple days, a day and a half maybe on this, I would say. And I'm starting to come up with some very interesting, helpful conclusions. And I have a whole sales campaign, by the way, that I thought of that I never thought of before from spending time with my data. And it's a sales campaign that, looking back, if I told you what it was, you would say, that is so obvious that it should have already been happening. And you're right.
Yeah.
But it's again, what you said earlier, what questions are we not asking? And so spending time with your data is a really critical way of doing bottom-up analysis. So I know you have a story that's kind of cool. I know you wanted to interview me, Beastmode, but you frankly have a cool story that I think we could all benefit from, of how you looked at some data and you frankly some bottom-up with some top-down experience too. You made some interesting conclusions and some recommendations in a pretty timely manner for a partner.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Howie. But so I had an opportunity that came across for a nonprofit that's here locally to DFW, and they had some really great ways that they were providing a return for their investment for people who were wanting to sponsor or partner, or quite frankly donate. There was a way, or just get involved. They had a pretty unique way of providing a return, providing a great time. And so, but what they were doing is they were undervaluing themselves. And so the first part of that is it took them a year before they were willing to listen to anything that I had to bring them. And so it took them a year because from us to even have a conversation that we could have had a year before, because they were unwilling to take the time, like you said, to address that data. And so really, once we got our hands on it, we looked at it, they were severely undervaluing themselves by almost by tenfold. So ideally they were charging $5 for something they should have been charging $50 for. And it was very apparent by their sales. It was very apparent by their returns from repeat customers that, I mean, they were blowing it out of the water, but they were essentially giving their services and their product and everything away. And so it had to be addressed immediately. It couldn't wait for analysis. It didn't really need anymore. So they had to have an immediate change of the pricing starting at the top that went all the way down. So really what we did is we took their pricing structure and we just pulled it up. So we expanded it up, but then at the same time, to adhere to those standards, because again, you can't just take, you know, a 2020 Honda and pass it off for a Ferrari, even though it's a nice car. And so what we had to do is we had to address, you know, essentially the engine components, how we were delivering the product at the exact same time. So one had to be working simultaneously and one had to be coming up from the bottom to meet in the middle to provide exactly what you've been talking about. But it took a lot of vulnerability on their behalf. And again, it took them a year before they were willing to have that vulnerable conversation. But again, just in the 3 months that now we've been shifted, their business has grown by almost 300%. Just by addressing something so simple as we're misappropriating our pricing.
Well, what speaks to me about that, so that's a great story overall of how you looked at data and how essentially you allowed it to speak to you by doing some bottom-up analysis and use that to make a recommendation. And they had the courage to follow the recommendation. You had the courage to be a little bit forceful as a recommender and put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really important for you. And your heart, I know your heart is to make a difference and to help people improve their business, which is what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
And so it's literally a great story of doing that. But there's a couple things that I think are dependencies to that, you know, success, which speaks to me from your story, which is that when you saw the data, you had the courage to make a recommendation. So again, you kind of overcame that inner stuff, which says, what if I screw them up? What if I, you know, and so you trusted the data and you trusted your judgment and you put yourself out there and you took a step. The problem is this, again, we're limited so much in this world by fear, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that we don't take action. We give ourselves sort of that, you know, paralysis of analysis. And I think if we can just take some action, I mean, it's a lot easier to steer a moving car. But if you're just sitting there paralyzed by needing more data forever, which I've done that before. I've certainly been in that situation before. You know, it's got to be perfect or whatever, you know, whatever the situation may be, you know, over analysis. And so I like the fact that you said you literally flipped it in a short, like a day or two or something, like a pretty short amount of time. Yeah. So you took action. And that's the thing is like, there's a few, there's, unless you just spend all your money and you go bankrupt. I mean, there are situations where I suppose a mistake could end it all, but most business things, if you'll just try them, you know, you're going to have a certain amount of success in them. And even if it doesn't work, you're going to learn from it. And most mistakes are recoverable.
Yeah. And there are times, and I totally agree with you. There are times to where you do have to do more of a rollout or a trickle of the analysis. I have the data, but you know what? It's not feasible to sit here and change everything all at once. It's just, you know, because we still need sales, we still need productivity, we still have to service what we already have. So sometimes it's not feasible. What in this instance, it was a win-win for lots of reasons. Number one, I didn't have anything to lose to put my suggestion out there. Some people do, and so, but again, even if you feel like you have something to lose, you really don't in the long term if you hold back something that's potentially a negative. So my encouragement is go ahead and say it. The worst thing that could be said is, you know, we don't like your analysis or it's not a great time. But you know what? I have taken the burden off of my shoulders. I've done what I was supposed to do. And you know what? Then sometimes you got to hold fast to that. but then at the same time, um, it's really a great opportunity whenever you're coming in with strong data to make a strong position, and you're able to show the passion and emotion of, this means a lot to me and I care about this. And again, companies value that when they see your emotion in that, when they see that, hey, I'm invested in this, outside of work, maybe, because the emotions carry far from here, and so, I would say go for it, you know.
Well, there's a lot in there. So there's a lot in there. I'm going to forget everything. There's a couple things that I want to pull up before I lose the rest of them. One of them is that you said, by you presenting it and by you having the courage and the confidence to do that, and by you, putting yourself out there, as you say, you at least took, at worst case scenario, you took the burden off your shoulders. And
Yeah.
what that means to me is that there is a business burden, and there's a business burden that it may be your purpose. If you notice a business problem, and everybody needs to understand this, if you notice a business problem, it may be because it's your purpose to actually help with the problem. And I think, Jordan, this can help with people who find themselves sometimes complaining at work, not realizing that's a gift.
Yeah, they're the
That
solution.
they're the solution. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. So Kim, I mentioned earlier, wonderful lifelong friend at this point. So Kim used to be, I went through some DISC training, which is a personality profile thing.
Yeah.
So that company sent me through some management training for DISC. And I found out that Kim was a certain profile that's kind of an analytical scientist type or whatever,
Mm.
from that. And I used to bring new ideas to the team, and I used to find that Kim, and if she's watching, hey, this is a good story. But she used to kind of bring the problems with the new program or the new whatever, right? She used to bring me the problems. I went to training and I realized it's because she's a scientist in the DISC profile. I hope I'm getting that right, but
Yeah.
the DISC people will forgive that. Anyway, I could tell she was that analytical analyzer who can judge things as hitting the mark or not and find the problems in it. So check this out. What I did was I turned future strategies into an opportunity to let Kim exercise her gift by giving me feedback before I released it to the rest of the team. So Kim got to have a lot of input, and she told me where the holes were. So it turned out that the burden, as you said, the burden that she had was actually a gift of feedback that she was able to provide to me once I learned to use it and not be sensitive, and just, understand that that was her gift and her calling. And so I think you're right. I think you did have a burden to that customer. You
Yeah.
care about them, and I love to hear that. I know that about you, and I absolutely feel that way about my customers too. And we do have a burden to share and to sometimes be a little bit forceful, and let our gifts speak and have the impact and have the arrow hit the mark where it needs to, and be willing to push past the that resistance that we might feel. And because of that, I was able to benefit from better programs in the future that were pre-vetted by Kim, and it was really wonderful. And she got to feel some ownership and some friendship from that, as well, which is really great. You did the same thing with this company. You let your gifts speak, and you took the burden and you let it all out there. And I do like something else that you said, and I'll flip it back to you. You said that it was based on a lot of data. I do
Yeah.
actually think that's important. I had a recent time at my current company where I had a rather big set of business situations that I wanted to go after. And so I spent quite a lot of time, probably did too much work, but I did a lot of that bottom-up analysis, and mixed with a little bit of top-down, actually, a little bit industry kind of stuff in there too. And I presented it to the company in this PowerPoint, in this long meeting and everything. And what I did was I relieved myself of the burden of showing the company what I was seeing, what we're dealing with, and some recommendations. And it did really, I felt very good about the fact that I had made a difference to convey that message. And whether they took the recommendation or not, I had done my part. So you can't always, you can't basically put out every fire or build every, a castle. But you can certainly use your gift and get it out there. So I like what you did there, and just wanted to pull a couple things out that kind of spoke to me.
Yeah, and some of the, I mean, I know that story because, I mean, you've elaborated it to me before, but, you know, I can see the fruits of you doing that, which was honestly, you didn't get into it, but it was very frustrating time, you know, to go through all that data, to not have it received maybe with as much passion and emotion as you had. But what it has done is it's opened your mind to what you're currently doing now, going through 20,000 lines, and who knows what's going to come out of this, all because you initially broke that seal, that barrier, and chose to be vulnerable because, again, it spoke to you. Now, I will tell everybody that the negatives will never outweigh the positives. The cost of saying nothing versus saying something, you know, they don't match up. So if you say something and it's not taken well, the cost of doing that is very low. The cost of saying nothing and having it come full circle, that is something that can come back and get you. So
Wow,
always
that's good.
take that opportunity
Beautiful.
and share that information, you know,
That's
because
awesome.
I mean, I can't piggyback it enough on Brian that we're all here for a reason, you know, whether you want to go down the faith avenue or not, but we're here in a position at a current role for a reason. And if there's something that seems to be in the way, you know, it's not for us to ignore. It's for us to figure out how to move it, how to go around it, how to pull the team together. Sometimes it's hey, Brian, or hey, Howie, or hey, whoever, you know, I got an obstacle here and I could use your assistance, but it takes that vulnerability to say, hey, you know, can you bring your top down to me, or can you bring some bottom up to me?
It's good. Wow, that's powerful. So everybody should really capture that, which is that you don't lose a lot. You might get embarrassed, or maybe you waste time or something, you know, by sharing or by trying to help, you know. So that's true. It's a little bit of a sacrifice, a little bit of a risk. All that's true. But the risk of not doing it, oh my gosh. I mean, I'll spit like 3 or 4 things for you right now that just speak to me out of what Beast Mode has said. First of all, think about your integrity.
Mm,
What if it was given to you,
yeah,
and because of fear, you did not share, right? What are the consequences that maybe you could have saved the company or the organization from some cost, or from some risk, or from some competitive threat, or from a feature in the product that could have been added in not very much time and could have increased sales? And you know, you can butterfly effect that away and say how layoffs happened because you didn't share, right?
yeah,
Literally, you don't know the consequences. You're given these ideas and these insights for a reason.
yeah,
Okay, so that's one consequence, is maybe there's negative things to the business. Another consequence is the negative aspect to your reinforcing your habit of fear, when you could have taken that, resisted that, and gone ahead with your idea and broken down a little bit of that personal fear, right? You lost an opportunity. Instead, you fed the dragon. As Jordan B. Peterson says, try to slay the dragon while it's small under the carpet. So you basically face things when they're smaller, because if you don't, they grow. So face this and slay this by dealing with your fear and sharing that feedback. And I think I had a couple more, but I lost them. But those are a couple, you know, that speak to me, Jordan, about the consequences, Beast Mode,
yeah.
of not, you know, facing those things and sharing those ideas. And you know, I guess one more thing. I just remembered one more. That analysis that you talked about earlier that I had done, which I actually did end up getting some pretty executive. Took me just a little bit for it to circle back, but I did get some good feedback on that. So thank you to those guys. But and that's all kind of still in progress. But what I wanted to tell you about that is that the analysis was not wasted,
No,
because I took it as a academic and a learning and a growth strategy. And I may have told you this at the time too. I said, I cannot lose by me going and doing integrity-based, bottom-up analysis with passion, because I care, not because it's personal, but because I care. It's like a college class. It's like the company is paying me to literally go and learn and become better. So
yeah.
whether or not it's used, I literally grew, and that actually did happen.
So if I can give you one more potential overall negative
Yep.
that while you were talking popped up in my mind, and that is one of the fears that really changed my life, a few years ago, whenever I started thinking about this and wanting to change certain aspects of myself, but then also businesses around me, is that if I don't change this, then who will? And then, so that's just one aspect of it. And again, and that's kind of the negative of fear, to where it's really the fear that's going to drive me. Something needs to change, and maybe I'm the only one that's here to do it. But then what's the next phase is, what if I grow, but because of my leadership and my management style, I didn't pass on that to people below me? Now, what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to voice their opinions? Do you think they're going to step out? No, they're going to bottle it up. And now we're duplicating and repeating the cycle whenever there's a cycle that needs to be broken. And all of us have that capability to break that cycle.
Wow. So can I repeat that back to you?
Yes.
So essentially, you have an opportunity by shining your light. I love to say that. I love to say that in business. By you shining your light,
Speaking
like
life.
Beastmode was saying, by you speaking life, by you shining your light in business, and being willing to make a difference when it's a little uncomfortable. You have to overcome that fear and all the what ifs, right?
Yeah.
By doing that, you actually give someone else courage. That is really a special thought, and I think that'll inspire a lot of people.
Yeah. And so if you're voicing your opinion, so I mean, because again, let's be real. If we're in a meeting, maybe some of us do have more confidence. Maybe some of us do have something that other people don't. By me voicing my voice and being vulnerable, willing to be shut down or unheard, or not have my ideas taken, it empowers other people's to say, you know what, I saw him do it. And so it makes us all more viable to want to do it.
That's awesome. Courage. Interesting. I think you do see that. I mean, if you look at the example of the 4-minute mile, right? Roger Bannister was the first one to run the 4-minute mile. It was thought up until he ran it at 4 minutes for 1 mile that the human body could not do that. Right. And after Roger Bannister did it, we have people in high school doing that. I'm making that up. I don't have that much running data, but I'm giving you, kind of an example. It's a common thing now to run for your top athletes, to run a 4-minute mile. It was quote unquote impossible up to that point in time. So there's something that we're meant to do. I think I want to just piggyback on what you're saying. I think we're meant to inspire one another. And by you overcoming something, it helps maybe me overcome something.
Yeah, totally does. And again, if, I tell guys all the time, and it's mainly guys that I tell this to, just because I can be pretty direct with it. But if you have the opportunity to drop a seed in somebody's life, and that seed's going to change the course of their legacy, what value would you place on that seed? And that seed is very valuable. Now, what value would you place on not placing it? And so we all have those opportunities to place those seeds in a business, in a conversation, each and every day. And I don't know which seed is going to change the course of somebody's legacy, but I know that there's those opportunities that are there, and I owe it to that person to do it for them.
It's great. Awesome.
So,
well, thanks, man.
Man, Howie, this was a great inaugural one. I love doing it, and I can't wait to when we catch back up again.
We'll catch up soon, Beastmode. I appreciate it. Thanks for teaming up with me on this.
I appreciate it, Howie. Be well, man.
Take care.